Check 1, 2, 3. Hello, Pillow Talkers, and welcome back to another episode of Pillow Talk Radio with me, Cora Boyd. Good morning. It's morning for me. It's a Monday morning for me. And my mom is in town for about 10 days, which is fun and exciting. She is off having breakfast with my aunt and uncle. We are going to go up tomorrow to Port Townsend for a few days, which, if you're not familiar with Washington State, Port Townsend is a really cute little port town, as one would imagine. Port Townsend. It's kind of right on the entry point of the Olympic Peninsula, which maybe you'd be familiar with. Olympic Peninsula is where Forks, Washington is, site of the vampire Twilight vibes. So anyway, we're going to go up to Port Townsend, tootle around, stay in like a really cute Victorian mansion, visit with some family friends. We used to go to Port Townsend all the time every summer when I would come to Washington from the other Washington. So if you don't know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., right outside of Washington, D.C., like 5 miles from the White House in Bethesda, Maryland. But my dad was from Seattle. My parents actually met out here. They had a pretty cute meet cute. I'll tell you guys about it sometime. But I came to Seattle every summer growing up, and my extended paternal family is all in the Seattle area, or mostly in the Seattle area. So anyhow, my dad was obsessed with small craft wooden boats. He was a big sailor guy and spent a lot of his youth tootling about on boats in Washington. So he would love to go to Port Townsend and just, be amongst the boats and such. So I haven't been to Port Townsend in a long time, but it's somewhere I used to go with my family all the time. So I'm excited to go spend a little time there with my mom. And now for the meat of potatoes, after my little chitter chatter section there, where I like to kind of check in, lock in with each other around the context of the moment and what's up with me. In today's episode, we are going to talk about an archetype, a way of being that I call the creative enterpriser. We're going to talk about what that means specifically. I'm going to share some stories about how I started to awaken my more enterprising side and connect that with more of my creative and artistic side. And ultimately, I want to invite you into this identity of being a creative enterpriser, if that feels like it resonates for you. And I suspect for many of my listeners and people who follow my work, it does resonate. And it is certainly very resonant within Turned On, my performance and fulfillment coaching membership for creative enterprisers, ambitious creatives. So let's start with a story. This scene, a sexy, dimly lit speakeasy in the basement of an Italian restaurant in Mexico City. The year 2014, my age 21, maybe 22, probably 21. Let's say 21. It is the summer before my senior year of college at Tulane, and I have finagled a very sweet deal for myself. I have received a grant from the Newcomb College, which is the women's center basically at Tulane, because Newcomb College used to be the women's college and then it got kind of absorbed into Tulane. And I was very involved with Newcomb the Newcomb Institute. I was a member of the Newcomb Scholars, which is kind of an honors scholars cohort of women, 20 women each year. And you go through this curriculum and get access to a lot of resources, which I really benefited from and got to do really cool projects over my time in college with grants and funding from the Newcomb College Institute. I also worked there. That was one of my jobs. I babysat through college. I tutored football players in Spanish, and I worked at the Newcomb College Institute, which was the best job ever because I basically just answered the phone sometimes when it rang, and I was like, "Hello, Newcomb College Institute. This is Cora." And I ate leftover food, snacks, and pizza from all the events, and I hung out in this sick house where all the scholastic girlies would congregate and study. It was absolutely wonderful. So thankful to the Newcomb College Institute. Shout out to my fellow Newcomb scholars. It was essentially like a minor in gender studies because each year we would have a class that our cohort would take, and it was always focused on women in some capacity. So, anyway, I have gotten an absolutely sweet grant from the Newcomb College Institute to spend the summer in Mexico City interning at an artist collective called Soma. And I found out about this artist collective from my major advisor, who was really awesome, super cool guy, very successful Mexican novelist. Shout out to Yuri Herrera. Yuri told me about this artist collective because he had lived in Mexico City for a very long time and introed me to them. And it was the best internship ever because I barely did any work. I think I spent a few hours organizing some digital files, and I was tasked with visiting lecturers at the Soma designated like guest apartment. I was tasked with greeting them with the keys and getting them set up there. But aside from that, I pretty much just got to openly participate in this international artist residency, which was so cool. So there were 20 artists from around the world who came, and I basically just got to participate in the whole program. So we would have lectures at the space, there would be art shown at the space, there would be visiting teachers. And the coolest part is that we would go on these field trips together where we would often visit different artists across Mexico City, their studio spaces, go to art shows, and we also just like collectively partied together and like went to cool art parties and galleries and all sorts of things. And it was a really cool group, this cohort of international artists. So I also had a rather silly living situation. I was living in this kind of, I guess you could call it like a long-term hostel. It was like this big house thing. It wasn't even totally a house. Basically, there were maybe like 5 rooms in there. And it was me and a friend of mine who I'm still friends with, Yasmin, who lived upstairs. And then this really sweet Mexican couple lived in there. And my room was really huge and had kind of a stained glass window that did not really have audio insulation at all. And the space also operated as a functioning CrossFit studio. But they were kind of scammer vibe, like hot fitness couple scammer vibes. They were really into selling this kind of pyramid scheme supplement called Herbalife. Like I remember once I did one of the CrossFit classes, they were obsessed with CrossFit. The CrossFit classes were happening basically outside of my window directly all day, every day. One time I did one, and then the woman like fed me some Herbalife and then like charged me after and like didn't tell me she was going to charge. It was a very very odd living environment. And it was on the outskirts of the neighborhood Condesa, if you've been to Mexico City, but it was right on a highway. So it was right on the outskirts. And it was close to the Bosque de Chapultepec. And so I was living there and I was participating in this international artist residency program. And it was absolutely awesome. I was having the time of my life. I love Mexico City. I've been many times, and it is just such a dynamic, rich, deep, inspiring, and alive place. And I love Mexico too. Mexico is one of my favorite countries that I have been to. I love the culture. I love the aesthetics and the visual culture. I love the people. I love the landscape. Shout out to Mexico. Oh yeah, this was also a pre-Uber time and I was conscientious and kind of, on high alert for some very real dangerous shit that can go down in Mexico. So I remember one of the precautions was that I was advised not to just take taxis off of the street. So I had this trusted taxi company that I would call whenever I needed to get anywhere or, take a car anywhere. And I would use my little prepaid phone to call this number and there would all be chickens clucking and they would send me a safe vehicle that would get me from point A to point B. So back to this basement speakeasy. I have a friend, Juan Felipe. Shout out to Juan Felipe. He is a friend of mine who I met at Tulane because he was an exchange student there. He is from Bogota, Colombia. And he is, or was at the time, a McKinsey consultant. And he is in Mexico City for a project. And he is staying at the Four Seasons in Polanco, which is kind of the bougiest area of Mexico City, or one of the bougier areas. So he is out partying with his fellow McKinsey consultants and invites me to come along. So this is how I find myself in this bougie, gorgeous speakeasy in the basement of an Italian restaurant in Polanco in Mexico City, surrounded by business vibes and consultants. So at this time, I have a pretty strong sense of identity around being artistic. My mom is a sculptor and the artistic director slash curator of an art gallery and organization. And I went to Waldorf School, which is super arts infused. I acted professionally throughout high school. I'm studying creative writing at this time. I crochet, I sew, I draw, I paint. I love to sing. I play the guitar and the Irish tin whistle. I grew up very expressed in my creative artistic self. And that is very much part of my identity at this time. Still is. However, I am not yet embodied at all in my identity of being enterprising and business savvy and being really interested in the art and science of business. I'm starting to feel inklings and a fire in my belly and a lot of curiosity around these types of conversations, but it is actually so at odds with how I view myself at the time, with my self-concept, that it's kind of confusing to me. And in retrospect, it was always an interest and it was always kind of obvious. I was always really proactive and loved bringing things to life or kind of seeking out or creating opportunities for myself, managing my acting and finding auditions around DC and all of that in high school and taking that really seriously. and, selling portraits of horses with my friends and buns and muffins to the neighbors in order to save up money with the aspirations of all of us going to England to be attendants to Queen Elizabeth. Making my own clothes and designing and kind of plotting a little boutique in my journal as a kid. So the inkling was there, but I hadn't yet clocked that I love business and I'm so interested in it and I have really good instincts and I love bringing things into existence through artistic mediums and also through the medium of business and enterprise. I did not know this at the time, and as I said, it was kind of at odds with my identity, but I was in this speakeasy with all of these business consultants, and they were having all of these conversations about business and enterprise, and I felt just very intrigued and excited and lit up and a fire in my belly. We were drinking gin tonics in these beautiful glasses. And, I was feeling it. I was a little drunk. And I leaned over to my friend and this just felt in terms of my self-concept and kind of how I presented and identified and all the things at that time felt kind of preposterous. But I leaned over to my friend Juan Felipe and I was like, "Should I go to business school?" And we were both just, like, cracking up because it felt, like, kind of preposterous for so many reasons, and just like, "What?" And then I was kind of in a semi self-deprecating way, which, I wouldn't really speak of myself in these terms now, but, like, at that time, I was just like, "Oh my god, this is" I felt very, like, Elle Woods vibes, like, "Should I go to business school?" And so I started joking around, and I was just like, "Dividends, dividends." So I was having these, like, awakening myself and then, like, this kind of gradual process in the handful of years to come of, like, being like, "Yeah, whoa. I really am, like, turned on by business and enterprise." And that is a new self-concept to step into, and I had a lot of stuff to work through around whatever preconceptions I had of, business and suits and boardrooms and whatever. For some time after that, we would have this running joke with some of my friends of like some of my business school friends, because I did actually have a lot of friends at Tulane who were in the business school. So I would be like, "Dividends," very Elwoods, "Dividends." At the time, I had no fucking idea what dividends were. I just, like, heard them talking about dividends. Now I obviously know what that means and, fed my curiosity and kind of natural business instincts and become very business savvy and, like, understand and acutely interested in all of these functional pieces of the art and medium of business and entrepreneurship. And I actually did consider going to business school. I did consider going to get an MBA. There were different programs that I was looking at. Ultimately, I went the route of a self-appointed figure it out as you go MBA via starting a business and figuring it out. And through my own experience as a creative enterpriser of having friends who are very embodied in their self-concept as an artist or a creative, and then having other friends who are very embodied in their identity and their self-concept as being a business person or being an entrepreneur. Or I notice how common it is for people to hold these self-concepts separately. There's a very fascinating interplay and perceived duality between these two identities that, to an extent, we all hold both of, right? It's kind of like we've spoken about in a previous episode from way, way back, what I call the talent and the manager, these two inner avatars. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's an episode called something about like embodying your avatars or embracing your avatars. It's from a while back, but I'm basically talking about these two inner archetypes and how much it has helped me to name these and kind of give these archetypes a role in my life of like, okay, there's the talent within me that is the creative, that is the one that really has certain requirements to be turned on and to create and be able to access my creativity, access my ability to perform, access my ability to unleash my talent, right? And then there is the manager within me, which is the one who sets boundaries to protect the talent, the one who negotiates things on behalf of my talent, the one who holds the talent accountable via discipline or, taking care of the vessel when I don't feel like it, AKA, going to the gym or whatever, right? It's a similar conversation to what we're talking about here because a huge motivator for me for working for myself and starting my own business was creative freedom and lifestyle freedom for myself. Being able to design my lifestyle and design my career in a way that worked for me and that I wanted, right? That allowed me the freedom to travel, the freedom to design my days, the freedom to choose who I work with and who I don't, the freedom to choose the projects I engage with and the ones that I don't, ultimately all in the service of my highest quality of life and my greatest expression as Cora Boyd in this lifetime. And whether or not you have a career in a mode of making money that is directly tied to your creativity or, you know, expression, personal expression, you still are a creative person in the world, right? There are so many ways that you can figure out how to be expressed as a creative person and make cool things and create projects that you care about and make money. And sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes it's the same act, right? But what I want to encourage everyone to acknowledge, and what I really work with people inside of Turned On to bring some relationship between these two inner archetypes, the enterpriser, practical, system structures, bottom line, money making vibe, and the creative, exploratory, expressive, experimental vibe, is that the two work so well together, and the two have to work together, and the two have always had to work together in some capacity, right? Like art and commerce has always been intertwined in culture in many different iterations and many different manifestations. And I believe no matter what our specific aspirations are, if we are people who identify as ambitious, creative, and or enterprising, it really behooves us to develop or round to embrace the synergy between creativity and enterprisingness. That's a word I just made up, I suppose. So, for example, if you are an artist, right? If you are a musician, let's say, it really behooves you to embrace the reality that you are also a business person. You're going to need to learn how to market your music. You're going to need to learn about visual branding, of creating a visual brand identity. You're going to need to learn about managing people, right? If you have a band, you're going to need to learn about leadership. You're going to need to learn about cultivating healthy business relationships, right? With different venues, with different collaborators, right? You're going to need to learn about managing money. You're on tour, you need to pay your band. Gonna be really, really difficult to be successful if you don't embrace the reality that you are also an enterpriser. And if you don't, and some people don't, then they hand that off to someone else and want to stick their head in the sand. It's really easy to be taken advantage of. The most successful musicians, if you pay attention, are very, very, very savvy business people, very savvy enterprisers. And of course, they have managers, they have team, they have people around them who maybe have higher strength in that realm, but they're not ignoring it. They're not completely outsourcing that to another person with no input and no knowledge, right? They're not putting their head in the sand about that part of it. Similarly, if you are a business owner who maybe is not super embodied in your identity as a creative, the creative elements of your business, right? Like, again, maybe you're going to hire people who that's more their wheelhouse. But if you don't do anything to develop some sense of knowledge, savvy, and taste when it comes to your visual brand, your brand voice, your marketing campaigns, right? Even the very, very creative act of an idea landing in your consciousness as a seedling, and that process of creation and creativity of allowing that idea to germinate and nurturing that idea and bringing it into existence, right? That is creativity. That's a creative process. So I also think there's a difference between the conditions and the process that help creativity thrive and the conditions and the process that help us be most productive, right? There's a difference between creativity and productivity. There's a lot of overlap, but creativity needs a different type of input. Creativity actually requires a lot of breathing room and space around it. Creativity doesn't always operate on a linear timeline. So this is a lot of what we work on and fine tune and finesse and harness together inside of Turned On. It's marrying, cultivating both the creative identity and the creative process and the enterpriser, strategic, systematic, smart, practical, business savvy. Oh, yeah. Also, sales, I forgot to mention for both the creative and the enterpriser, like sales skills, right? Promoting yourself, promoting your work, learning how to speak about who you are and what you do and what you create in a way that other people are able to see the value of it, right? These are all business skills. So, this is an identity that I want to invite you guys to step into, the creative enterpriser. I say enterpriser because, some people talk about creative entrepreneur, right? Which is dope. I think in a certain sense, we're all entrepreneurs of our lives, right? But not everyone identifies as an entrepreneur or has the desire to own a business or even has the desire to merge their income with their artistic practices. So to me, creative enterpriser captures that essence without excluding what someone might do to make money in the world. So, on that note, my fellow ambitious creative enterprisers, hashtag dividends, dividends, dividends. We will leave it at that. So, thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like to join our Turned On cohort, next enrollment period is from the 20th to the 27th. Waitlist for first access will be in the show notes. We also have a communication lab coming up, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.